Hello, friends, and welcome back to The Free Advantage. I'm your host, Heather Davis, and I want to invite you into a new season of real stories, real recovery, and real freedom. This show has always been about self-discovery, authenticity, and recovering a life of freedom. And this year, we are taking that journey together in a deeper way. You're going to hear raw, honest conversations with people walking this path in real time. Stories of growth, healing, purpose, and becoming whole. You'll also hear from me as I reflect on these themes that rise from the stories, answer your questions, and offer small, meaningful takeaways that you can carry back into your week. This is not just a podcast you listen to. It's a place you belong, where you are part of the conversation. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Heather Davis, host of the Free Advantage podcast. Well, folks, today is the day. I know last week I started to touch base a little bit on this, but I want to welcome you all to the beginning of my story. So pull up a seat, get yourself something to drink, and settle in. So, where do I begin? In leading up to the days up to this moment here, I have literally asked myself what feels like 1,000,000 times, how do I do this? How do I tell my story without boring you or going off onto tangents or getting lost on one thing for too long? I really was like, how do I do this? Now, don't get me wrong. I've told tons and tons of people my story. A lot of people know about my life. But I think just kind of doing it here, it feels a little different, right? Because I'm not in front of somebody else having that back and forth. So this feels different. But I think I finally came to the conclusion that, yeah, I don't tell my story without some of those things happening. And so my story is a lot. It's messy. It's long. And sometimes parts of my story lead to other thoughts and memories that pop up during that. And so in sharing here with you, I want it to be just like we're sitting together on the couch and that you were getting the complete, raw, and unveiled version. So I will be sharing it in 3 parts this month. And without further ado, welcome to my life story. So, long ago, I think I'd mentioned it last week, I grew up in church. My parents were pastors. My dad's parents were pastors. So I was what they considered a PK, which is a preacher's kid. I grew up in Sunday school. I really didn't know anything other than church when I was little. I really have come to the understanding that I really never knew a life without God in it. It was just something that was ingrained in me, and it was always a part of me. So I didn't really know much different. And outside, to the outside perspective, our family looked like the quintessential American family. It looked like we had everything that people would ask for. We were this perfect, beautiful little 4-person family. There was my mom and my dad and my brother and me. We had a boy and a girl, and everything just always seemed to fit. And it seemed like it was just this perfect little thing. And for a long time growing up, it felt that way. It definitely felt that way. I did all of the fun things. I was in school. I was on the drill team. I was in bands. I played the flute. My brother was in, Boy Scouts, and my parents were involved. And so it seemed like a very normal life, except for the few things that didn't. Now, to me, they always seemed that way. They always seemed normal until I got older and realized, oh, this is not so normal for most people. But for us, there was a lot of moving around. And for some kids who weren't in the military or what I consider the witness protection program, normally you didn't move around. Most of my friends I knew stayed in one place. But for me, we always moved. We were always in and out of different homes. We were in and out of different schools. So to me, that was the normal. The change became my stability. And we changed a lot. I think by the time I get done with part 1, I will have done 33 homes. and 12 schools. So it was a lot. And I think over the years, I've realized through that, like how much that particular like theme in my life really shaped who I was and how I maneuvered. But yeah, we moved a lot, and it was either my dad was changing jobs or we just were moving to a different place. Or we moved churches because my parents were pastoring and they would go back and forth. There was a lot of that. And things seemed, normal as far as that was concerned. I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't really, there was no really securing the kind of like core childhood things that you would normally do when you're up and you're moving so much. We didn't have a lot of that. So I got used to it just being with my brother. I think him and I really spent most of our time together, and we really connected in a different way because he was my best friend because that's who we had. And not that he's not my best friend, but we didn't have outside sources who were really friendships and things like that. They were more of just those friendship acquaintances and like, I'm here today and I'm gone tomorrow. I think that crossed over like our moves. It probably crossed over three or four different states at the time. 2 countries. Like there was a lot. It was a lot of moving on and around the United States for sure. But as I got older and like high school became a thing, it started to feel a lot different. I wanted more stability in where school was because I was looking for those milestone moments, the going to school, having your friends, graduating, going to prom, having all of those kinds of things that you normally have as a kid. I wasn't getting. And when high school rolled around, I was really looking forward to that. And at the time we were being homeschooled. So, I was either in and out of public school. It's either being in public school or being homeschooled. It was one or the other, and whatever kind of suited our lifestyle at the time is kind of what ended up happening. And once high school rolled around, I was like, I really want to be in school. I wanted friends. I wanted to do the fun things. I wanted to be in like extracurricular activities. And so my parents decided to put us back in school. And at this time we were living in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I went to a school there. I went to Union High School, and it was a very exciting time for me. I was nervous because I hadn't been in school in a while, but I was excited to get back into like some type of community. There's some type of community there. And I made lots of friends there, and I found my first boyfriend. He was the love of my life at the time. And I had fun. I was in band. I joined marching band, and I got to travel with them. We went to regionals, we went to nationals, and I got to do a bunch of things that I just never would have been able to do had I not been in school, obviously, right? And my brother was on the wrestling team. It was a lot of good stuff, right? For us, it felt like a really good time. But in that time, things were good for us in some ways. And then what we didn't know at the time was that behind the scenes, our life as we knew it was starting to fall apart. And we would go on vacation in the summers to come back to Texas to where our family was, and we would visit for about a month or so. We got to spend time with our grandparents and our friends. And one summer I guess my parents called it my rebellious summer because I had come back home and I had decided that I was going to shave my head. I always like to say I shaved my head before Brittany made it cool, right? And or, before at least she made it popular. But I had fallen in love with this woman. I don't know if anybody out there remembers her. Her name is Susan Powder. She was the Stop the Insanity woman. And she had shaved, bleach blonde hair. And when I saw her, I thought, wow, that is so cool. She's so beautiful. I just love that. And I wanted to have her hair so bad. And my parents were like, no, that's never going to happen. So when I came home for the summer, I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And actually, my grandmother took me to get my hair cut, and she let me get my hair shaved. Now, I did it legit, right? I had a hairdresser do it. I didn't just like go in there and buzz my hair off. So I got my hair cut, and then my uncle, my favorite uncle, Uncle Brian, he's who we actually live with now, he had decided he's going to help me bleach it. So I think after 7 trips to Sally's and enough bleach, he finally got my hair platinum, almost white blonde. And I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was one of the most amazing things I'd ever done. And lo and behold, of course, when I got home and I stepped off the airplane, my parents felt very different about that than I did. My mom was like, okay, it's hair, it grows back. But my dad, I think that he was not feeling quite so much the same way. I think he was very upset with me. Definitely leaning into that whole, that rebellious vibe. But I mean, come on, man, I was 16. I'm like, if the worst I'm doing is shaving my head, then, why not? But it was a fun time in my life at least so I thought. So not long after we had gotten back from that trip, my rebellious summer trip, I was brought into the living room and was sat down, and I was informed that my parents were going to be getting divorced. Now, this was such a shock. I remember them telling me, like, don't tell your brother. We're not telling him yet, but we wanted to let you know that this was happening. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. I think I don't even remember exactly how I felt in that moment because it was really just pure shock. I was just like, oh, well, I'm not going to do this by myself. So I remember running back to his bedroom and knocking on the door. I'm like, get out here. Mom and dad are getting divorced. And he was like, what? And, that's kind of how the news got broken to him. And, it was kind of maybe not a good thing, maybe not in the best way. But of course, I'm a kid at the time. And he was younger than me. But I was like, there's no way I'm doing this by myself. You're not going to dump this kind of news on me and then just expect me to deal with it by myself. I'm definitely going to bring my partner in crime in here. Because at that point, it felt like it was just him and I against the world, and we had to stick together because we didn't know what was going on. Oh, excuse me. And what is going on? We didn't know. We didn't know what's going on. Why? Why was this happening? I think the thing is that we never really saw them fight. Like they had the normal couple things, right? There was no major upset. It just seemed kind of like life was normal, and then it wasn't. And it wasn't long after that for me, everything for me just came crashing down. The world as I knew it and how I knew it was going to be and how my future looked that was it. It just went away. My parents were no longer living together. My mom moved out. She was pretty much non-existent at that time. And we were left there with him. My dad, and it was pretty much, we just felt left to our own devices. I remember staying up till all hours of the night and having to get up at 4:30 in the morning to be on the field to march every day at school. And I remember just him stopping, my dad taking me to school and him stopping at the corner store and I used to get some chocolate donuts and a jolt. I don't know if anybody out there remembers Jolt drinks, but they were one of the highest caffeine content, just like sodas you could get at the time. And I remember I was just living on those to just try to keep myself awake because I wasn't sleeping at night. I was on the phone all night with friends, or I was watching television. It was just definitely going through an era of insomnia, I think, because I just was searching for whatever straws I could grasp at the time. There was definitely a huge void that I started to fill with other things. And so as we moved on, high school, I was in my junior year. And as time went on through that year, I became less and less interested in school and more interested in just whatever. School was boring. I didn't really know what I was doing it all for anymore, I think. I didn't know I was doing it for anything other than you have to go to school and graduate. But I remember going to football games and looking for my family and them not being in the stands anymore. I remember asking for, I needed some paperwork signed for something for school and it just not happening. I remember needing to be picked up from school and then it was find a ride from your friends. And so then it was hunting down people who would bring me home every day. And and things like that. And then, spending the majority of your time alone. I was either hanging out with a friend of mine, or I was hanging out with my brother, or I was by myself at home. My parents just went from being this happy family to being completely non-existent in our lives. And it was a huge change, and it was a huge transformation in my life to undergo, not understanding or knowing why any of it was happening. My relationship with my mom took a drastic hit. Like, she was never around anymore. She was not there. She didn't even live in our home. And at the time when she first left, we weren't even allowed to visit her. I didn't know where she lived. I didn't know anything about it. So I remember one time I had my car. Or borrowed my dad's car, and she had been there at the house and she left. And I remember I followed her home. And this may be news to her. I don't know if she knows this, but I had followed her home so I would know where she lived. And then I was like, oh, okay, she lives here. And then I remember over a period of like 2 or 3 weeks, getting up enough nerve that I was going to go over there. I was going to show up. And I did do that. Eventually I had driven over, and I showed up one afternoon, and I knocked on her door. And I remember her answering and just being, wow. I think she was really shocked that I was there. She's like, what are you doing here? And I remember, I'm like, well, I wanted to see you. Excuse me. And she was like, well, you can't be here right now. And I was like, what do you mean I can't be here right now? Like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm at my mom's house. Like, why can't I be here? And she's like, you need to leave. You can't be here right now. And she had company over. So, now looking back at all that makes sense, that she didn't want me to see her with somebody else at the time. And we didn't know that there was anybody else at the time. And so it was, I kind of got shut out. She told me to leave, and she shut the door, and that was it. And I remember being completely devastated and turning around and walking back, crying, getting in my car, thinking, why doesn't my mom want me? And why does she want me here? It just didn't make any sense. And, I realize now that my mom at the time she was moving on. Her and my dad did not work out. And so she was looking for different things. She was devastated in her own way and trying to find her way through navigating that time in her life. But, as a kid, none of that made sense to me. And not wanting me to be a part of all of that and know all of the ins and outs of what was going on with them. And so there I was. I think after a couple of weeks, I think my mom came and she let me come over, and I went back to visit her. And it was, I was so excited to see her because I missed her so much. And when I got to go over there and see her, like, I stayed the night. And at that point, I decided I was never leaving. I was like, I'm not going back. I'm not going back to Dad's. I want to be here with you. I miss you. You're my mom. And so she let me stay. And, thinking about all the things that happened after that moment, I guess I really shouldn't have stayed. She really shouldn't have let me stay, because she was not in a place to be a parent right then. I don't really know that either one of them were, but I think the place with her was a little bit different. Like, she was really, I think, just lost a whole sense of herself and who she was and what she was doing. So my time there turned into really a free-for-all. I was going out with my friends. I was staying out late. I was getting up. I was missing school, going to school. I was cutting school. And then I remember eventually, like halfway through the year, I ended up I got invited to a party from one of my teachers. He was my American Lit teacher. He was an intern, and he was going through his graduate school. So I remember he had written something to me on one of the papers that I had turned in, an essay, and he had invited me to go to his graduation party. And so I asked him if I could bring a friend, and he was like, sure. So my best friend and I ended up at that night. It was like a Friday night, and we ended up driving like all the way to downtown Tulsa, where we did not belong, in a bad part of town, by ourselves late at night, and to a college graduation party, at 16 years old. And I ended up going out there and hanging out. And for me not just back then, I was never like a party girl. I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs. I was not into those kinds of things, but I definitely was not one to say no to doing fun stuff. I was definitely more of the like, I like this guy. He's really cute. I want to hang out and do fun things, but I was definitely not in a place where I did drugs or drank and things like that. It just wasn't for me. I didn't really need it to feel comfortable with myself. So especially back there, and I think the worst thing I did is I smoked. I smoked cigarettes, and that's pretty much what I did the whole time. I would smoke a pack of cigarettes and drink my Dr. Pepper, and so. But anyway, we were ended up at that party, and I remember my friend was not so much that girl. She definitely was the party girl. She drank a lot, and I remember her being really, really drunk that night on the way home, and it was like 4:30 in the morning, and she couldn't drive. And she's like, "You're gonna have to drive the car." And I remember she had a truck at the time, and it was a Standard, and I had never driven a stick in my life, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I remember her laying in my lap. Her head's in my lap. I'm trying to like do the clutch and the gas. And she's like, she's like trying to shift for me in her drunken state while I'm just trying not to like kill the car. And Lord knows I did. Like, I felt like I must have killed the car like 100 times before we got home. And then pulling into the driveway at my mom's apartment thinking, oh my God, my mom's going to kill us. And then when I got there, she wasn't even home. So I was like, oh, okay. And it was like, not like, oh, I guess I'm not going to get in trouble, but it felt like, oh, I guess, she doesn't even know where I'm at. And that just became this idea where people weren't checking on me. They didn't know where I was at. They didn't really care where I was at because they were wrapped up in their own stuff. So eventually at this point, I'm 16, I'm dating a school teacher. I remember that I dated him until it became more serious, where he was like, oh, okay, where it was starting to be like more physical. And then I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And I remember bailing out of that situation fast. And as I'm trying to get out of that situation, I remember this guy my mom had been friends with, and he was the guy she was dating at the time. It was his best friend. And my mom had been hanging out with him on and off for a little while too. And she was scheduled to go to some concert. They were supposed to be going to a concert together. And she was kind of like, I'm not meaning to like put my mom under the bus, but she was scheduled to go to a concert with him. And she was doing this kind of behind her boyfriend's back. So he had come to pick her up. And at the time, just like miraculously, her boyfriend showed up unannounced. And so it was kind of awkward that they're both there at the same time, because it was a little weird. And my mom was like, oh, well, he's here to take Heather to the concert. And he was like, oh, I didn't know that. And she's like, yeah, I introduced him and he's going to take her to the concert. And my mom's like, well, you can just go. And so I was like, oh, okay. That sounds fun. I love concerts. I'd love to go to a concert. And I remember, the only concert I had been to up to that point was like DC Talk at church. I had seen the Newsboys in DC Talk at church. And so I had never been to like a secular concert at that point, but it was Primus. And at that time, in the 90s, the alternative rock grunge bands were a big deal, but they were going to a Primus concert. So this guy who I had just known like barely 10 minutes, him and I jumped into his car and we went and had dinner. And then before you know it, we're at this Primus concert downtown. And it was a fun time. I had a great time, had a great night. It was a fun concert. And, on the way home, I was like, wow, like he's an older guy. I'm at this concert. And, and of course at 16 years old, you're just kind of getting swept up. And that's exactly what happened. I got swept up. And I think that I got swept up in the romanticism of it in my mind, and this ideation, I don't even know how to say that word right now, of it. And him and I ended up dating. And he was 6 years older than me at the time. Well, at the time, he's still 6 years older than me. But, after one long makeout session on the way home from this concert, it was just kind of like a sealed deal. I was like, oh, that's it. I'm seeing him and we're together and he's this older guy and he's going to be here and he's got a car and he has a good job. He makes money. He can take care of me and he likes me and he wants to be around me. And that was as much as I could say right now for anybody else important in my life. My parents weren't there. They didn't care. They didn't want to do it. And he was a constant. Like he was checking on me, calling me and telling me that he loved me and he wanted to be with me. And he was taking me to dinner and buying me clothes. Um, and that's just kind of at that point was history. The rest was history after that. I dropped out of high school. I didn't even make it through high school after that. I think it was in October. I think is when we went. Maybe October. I think it was October. I think when we went to the concert, and we were together ever since. I pretty much, because I had already ended kind of things with the school teacher. I'm sorry, I keep playing with things in my hands. So if you see me like hold weird stuff, I'm like pens and lip gloss as I'm talking. But I had already, because I was having to see him every day at school, I kind of started like skipping that class specifically. And then before you know it, I skipped enough class that I was not able to graduate and move on. Well, not graduate, but I was not able to move on to my senior year until I completed certain things, or until like I had like the specific, like I had notes and stuff that I needed from my parents. But nobody at the time would do that. There was not enough attention being had that when I needed a note or something from school that they would do that for me. So it just didn't happen. Then I stopped going altogether. And so I think I probably went back, I think the last week of school, and I visited some of my friends and said goodbye to them. And I remember my very last day of school. I was like, yeah, today's the day. Today's going to be a big day. It's my last day of school. I knew then that I was not going back for my senior year, and I was pretty much like, yeah, I'm a grown up now. And I remember coming home from school and my boyfriend at the time picking me up, and we went somewhere. I'm not sure where, but we went to go do something. And then I remember on the way back, I was like, yeah, today's the day. And that was the day that I lost my virginity. I was like, yeah, right. Today's how we're going to do it. I was going to go out of school, go out of this old life of mine and into a new one with a big bang. And I was like, yeah, that's the thing. And so that was in May. I remember the day very well. It was May 31st. And by August, I was pregnant. I was pregnant with my first son. And after that happened, I had actually moved a few times in between, because there was this moment where I was like, oh no, I think I had actually broke up with him before I got pregnant. I'm kind of missing some things, but it's just kind of the way the story goes. I had broken up with him at one point, and my mom had moved. She had decided to move out of Oklahoma and move back to Texas to be closer to her brother. And when she moved, I went with her, and I probably was gone for about 2 weeks before I called him. I had broke up with him, moved with her, called him later and was like, hey, I hate it here. Please come get me. So he came and picked me up. And then after that, we were together ever since. And then I ended up pregnant. And I remember I was living with my dad at the time when I found out. And you talk about a surreal moment. I know that I used to think about like, oh, one day I'll have kids. But nothing prepared me for going to the doctor when I thought I had a UTI, and then them coming back and being like, well, we definitely know what's going on. And they're like, because my stepmom, or not my stepmom, but my dad's girlfriend at the time had taken me to the doctor, and he's like, do you want your mom in here? And I'm like, well, no, because she's not my mom. And he said, okay. He's like, well, I just want to prepare you. He goes, because I don't know if you know. He goes, but you're pregnant. And I was like, oh, okay. 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 So, and I think I just kind of said okay for like, I don't know, probably for the next few hours. And then I was like, how do I tell my dad that? And I remember having to tell my dad, and then having to tell my boyfriend at the time. And it was, I don't know, probably just a few weeks after that him and I got our own apartment and moved in together. And we were together for a while, for a few months. I think it was in August, and then in late October, his job at the time had transferred him to New York. And so I was going to go with him, but me being underage, so here's the thing. He's 6 years older than me. I'm underage, and now I'm pregnant. Now I'm 17, right? My birthday had come back around in February of that year. So I'm 17, and I don't know if I was 17 yet. No, I was still 16. I was still 16, but and it doesn't matter. The age doesn't necessarily matter. But anyway, so I'm very young at the time. I was underage. I was a minor. So when he left and moved to New York and I was supposed to go with him, because I was pregnant, there were all of these kind of like legalities with the fact that I couldn't get medical help during that time by myself because I was underage. So I couldn't sign for myself. So the best idea, of course, if any of you know, the best idea is for you to be married so he can take care of me and he can sign for me. And I remember walking down into the courthouse with my dad, and it's kind of these weird mixed emotions because I'm in a place where I want these things. Like, I want to get married. I want to be with this man. I want to go to New York. I want to do all of these things. But then having this weird contradiction of feelings inside me when we went to the courthouse and I watched my dad sign me over to him. There were a lot of mixed emotions in that. And I remember watching him sign over, and then us going from there into this little room where some justice of the peace was going to marry us. And it was real weird. I remember it wasn't like it normally is in like a normal courthouse. And it wasn't just like, you go into a courtroom. There was this weird, it felt dark and it felt shady. And maybe it's just because of the way I was feeling at the time, but it was odd. I thought it was odd then. I still think it's odd now, but it was just kind of a weird feeling. And I remember like it felt real like shady and sleazy and dark. And they just, they said the things, and then, you're married and you're gone. And then it was just like, okay, now he owns you. The transfer of ownership has been made. And literally 2 days later, I was on a plane to New York City. And I think I was going, at the time, it was going from shock to shock. I guess that's the best way to put it for me. Thinking back on it now, is I remember being shocked that my parents were getting divorced, shocked that my mom, was living the life that she was living. I was shocked nobody cared. I was shocked that I ended up with this older man. I was shocked that I didn't go to school. I didn't finish school. I got shocked that I was pregnant. And now I wake up in New York City and I'm shocked about this. Like, this was a huge change. I have now, granted, we've moved a lot and I've seen a lot of places, but they've kind of been in just like these same kinds of types of places. Like, I've lived out in Texas in the country. I lived in Oklahoma, which is, you're still in the city, but it's still kind of like the country. And then we had moved to Georgia. So and it was all kind of the same types of places in the South. I had never been to like a big metropolitan city before, outside of Houston. So I had no idea what to expect. And wow, like, I get there and it is it is everything you would think it is for an 18-year-old to just walk into New York City. The noise, the cars, the people, the buildings, it's so overstimulating and overwhelming that I remember I was being left alone during the day because he goes to work, right? That's how it is. And I remember I used to be so scared. Like, I would hear people out in the hallway because we're in the apartments, and you can hear people talking across buildings. Like, you look out my window and I see brick building. There's no trees. You don't really see the sky. And so I would hear people screaming and yelling and traffic and horns. And I remember I would sleep all day long and I would stay up all night long while he was home because I was so scared during the day to be by myself that I would just sleep it away. If I just slept, and then by the time he got home, I would wake up and we would hang out and go do whatever we were going to do in the evening. And then he would go to sleep and I would stay up because he was awake and I felt safer then. And then he would leave and I would go to sleep so I couldn't hear it all. It was, I remember I loved New York. There were so many cool things that I saw and I got to experience while I was there. And that was pretty much the gist of it. But eventually I got tired. I was pregnant. I was a few months pregnant by this point, and I was getting scared and tired and not feeling well, and my body was changing. And so I was like, I want to go home, right? Like playing house was starting to get old. And I really just was like, I need to go home. So at the time, it was right before Christmas. I remember he put me on a plane, sent me back home. I went actually back to Texas and stayed with my best friend for a while and kind of went between her and where my mom was staying. And at that point, she had moved on to San Antonio where her brother was living. So I did some time visiting before he came back. And he came back at Christmas and we spent Christmas with my family, and then we went back home to Oklahoma where our apartment was. And at that point, I had already made the decision, like, I'm not living here. I'm not living here. I don't want to have this baby here. I don't want to have this baby without my mom close. And so he agreed that was a good idea, and we left. We picked up and we moved to San Antonio to be close to my mom. And that's where we lived. We stayed there and we lived there until my first son was born. And what a day that was. What a day that was. Austin was born at the end of May. That's my oldest. And if y'all have heard me talking about him, he's the one that was in the Navy and he just finished his service term. He is my pride and joy. And he's been with me what I feel like my whole life. I gave birth to him when I was 18 years old, and he was just the most overwhelmingly precious thing in my life. And I know that he basically saved me. And I know a lot of women out there say that about their children, but it's true. And if you say that, I believe you, because it's true. He did that for me. He did that for me. But when I had him, it was a very traumatic event. Up until that point, my pregnancy had been really, really good. I loved being pregnant. Not a lot of women say that. I struggle hormonally normally. So when I actually got pregnant, it just seemed like everything leveled out and I felt really good and everything was going really well in my pregnancy. But when I woke up the morning he was due on the 30th. And so in the 30th, that was my due date. When I had thought, at least if I can get it out of my mouth, I had thought I was going to have him like throughout the whole month. I'd ended up in the emergency room thinking I was in labor and I wasn't. And then eventually I woke up on his due date at like 6:00 in the morning and I was in labor and I knew it. I'm like, this is not pretend. I know the difference now. And was like, okay. So the whole day we kind of spent walking around, doing all the normal things to try to like further labor along. And towards the end of the evening that day, like it just wasn't happening. They were like, don't come in. It's too soon. And so we went home. It's probably around 6:00 and I lay down and I took a nap. And I woke up. Man, I remember I woke up and I was like, oh no, I was in a lot of pain. And I was like, I felt like something was wrong. I was like, oh, I'm having like one long contraction, and it's not stopping. And I remember calling my mom all frantic and being like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. She's like, you need to get to the hospital. She's like, just go to the hospital. And so I remember, actually, it'd probably been a little bit earlier than 6 when we had went home, because now the hospital is about 45 minutes away. So we lived not close to the hospital. So when we got in the car, I was like, oh, the traffic, and like, we're never going to get there. I remember we had to have a parking ticket. Like when you like pull in, it gives you a ticket with a timestamp on it. And it was, I'll never forget it. It was 7:24 p.m. and we pulled in. And by the time that we pulled in, parked, got in the front door, got moved up to labor and delivery, get me in a room, get me in a gown, get monitors on me to check me. I was in between that and the time that Austin was born was like just like 45 minutes, something like that. He was born at 8:05 p.m. that night, and we pulled into the parking garage at 7:24. And I remember laying there in a lot of pain. I remember the doctor coming in and checking me, and not before that, the nurse had come in and put the monitor on me. And I remember looking up at the little monitor, like the where they have the heartbeats and stuff, and looking up there, and his heart rate, it was really low. So it was going about 30 beats a minute. And I remember like having other times where I've been checked in ultrasounds and stuff, like his heartbeat's like 150 beats a minute. So I was like, that seems like something's wrong. And so she left, and then she came back, and then she moved the monitor again, and it wasn't working. And then the doctor comes in and he checks me. And now the next part of the story, I'm going to put a trigger warning in the front of this video, but this is a trigger warning too for some people. So if there's stuff you don't want to hear about it, like skip over it, or don't listen to it, please. But he got on, he came in and checked me, and he could feel Austin's head, and he kind of like pushed his head up or whatever, and Austin's heart rate went right through the roof, and it went really high. And he was like, oh, he was like, okay, everything's okay. And then when he kind of like stopped checking me and like let off of Austin's head, Austin's heart rate went down again. And he just looked at me, and the next thing you know, I hear the word stat. And it's like all I remember. I remember them being like stat, and then like 100 people around me. And people were yanking my gown off. They're pulling, I got jewelry on. They're pulling my ear, trying to get my earrings out. They're pulling my rings off, and they're trying to get an IV in, and they can't. I'm crying and screaming. My mom's just walked in the room, and all of this stuff is going on. And then I have a doctor sitting up on the bed in between my legs, literally holding Austin's head out of my birth canal. So come to find out later on is that my body was not dilating, but Austin was trying to come. So he's trying to be born. I'm not dilating. I'm basically he's suffocating is basically what started happening. And so I literally have a doctor holding his head up out of my birth canal, so his heart rate's up, while everybody preps me for what now is going to be an emergency surgery. And I remember the anesthesiologist coming in. He's trying to, like, they're trying to get an IV in, and they can't, well, probably because I'm freaking out. And I could not calm down. I remember they tied my arms to the bed, and the anesthesiologist came over, and he had this really long, like, syringe. Now, it's not a needle, but it was just like a syringe full of this dark brown goo looking stuff. And he was like, you're going to have to drink your anesthetic. And I was like, what? And then he goes, you're going to have to drink this. And I said, oh, just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. And he looks at me in my face, and he put his hand on my forehead, and he goes, you don't have a minute. And it was in that moment, I was like, I think I just, as in that moment, I realized, oh no, my life's in danger. And so I just, like, immediately this calm came over me, and I just drank this anesthetic down. And then I felt like this overwhelming, like, stillness. I wouldn't say calm, but compared to the hysteria I had been in, I just felt this overwhelming, like, frightful stillness come over me. And I just was like, okay. And the next thing you know, they're wheeling me out of this labor and delivery room. So it was kind of like triage for labor and delivery. So you had like what looked like little ER rooms with like little curtains and stuff. And then they wheeled me out into the OR. And I remember being wheeled down into the hallway, and my mom standing there watching me, and my husband, God only knows where he was because he's squeamish. So he passed out during all of this. And I remember the nurse up above me, and I remember just looking at her, and I said, please, please don't let me die. Please don't let me die. Please don't let me die. And she looked down at me, and she's like, you're going to be just fine. Everything's going to be just fine. And she's like, I need you to count. And I remember counting. And then I was like, please don't let me die. She's like, keep counting. You're going to be fine. I'm going to be right here when you wake up. And I remember them hitting the doors, and that was all I remember. And I think at some point I do remember like this, I must have opened my eyes at some point in there, because I remember it's like really bright light. And, and after that, wow, like that's a lot even for me to like talk about. But, after that, I woke up about 4.5 hours later, because had been under general anesthesia. So I was knocked out for a while, and I remember coming to in the recovery room. Now this was an interesting moment for me, because I had, up to this point, had never experienced any real medical situation ever. I think the most is when I slammed my pinky in a car door. I got an x-ray of my elbow or my wrist one time. That's the most like medical things that had ever really happened to me. So this was just like super traumatic. It was super traumatic. And I remember coming out from under the anesthesia, and I can't open my eyes, but I remember hearing the nurse just say, press the button. And I remember like shaking my head, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, what button? Like, what is she saying to me? And like faintly feeling a lot of pain. So I must have been expressing to her how much pain I was in. And she was like, press the button, because I was on a drip, and not knowing what that meant. And I remember like, she grabbed my hand, and she took my thumb, and she like pressed this button. I heard this beep and whatever. And then after, I started kind of fluttering my eyes open and seeing her, and then rolling my head over, and then seeing my mom. And I remember seeing her, and like kind of really started to open my eyes with her. And then she's like, do you want to see the baby? And I'm like, baby? I'm so disoriented. I'm like, baby? No, I don't want to have anything to do with a baby. I was like, ugh. And I remember looking back at the nurse, the swapping back and forth, and like, what is going on? And mom's like, are you sure you don't want to see the baby? And so I'm slowly coming awake. And when I wake up enough and I look down, and my stomach is gone. Like right after I had him, it was like I had never been pregnant. It was such a weird thing. And I looked down, and I'm not pregnant anymore. And then I like immediately like just woke up and was like, oh my God, where's my baby? And I started freaking out, and I started yelling, and I'm like, where's my baby? Where's my baby? And the nurse was like, you can't see the baby until you get out of recovery. And then I start crying, and I'm like, where is he? And freaking out. And then my mom had to, she had some choice words for the nurse and the people there about me not being able to see my baby. And so they did bring him to me immediately after that. And I got to hold him and be with him while I was in recovery until they moved me to my room. And so, there I was, 18 years old. I had just gone through an extremely traumatic event for me. I had just given birth to my brand new baby. And, laying in the hospital bed going, wow, this is the first day of the rest of my life. When they laid Austin in my arms, there's definitely something that takes over with you as a mother. It's an indescribable thing that happens. And it's not just like a feeling or an emotion, that it is something that viscerally takes over your entire person inside and out. And from that point forward, it changed the trajectory of my entire life. I think I'm going to stop there. And y'all come back next week for part 2. I thank you for being here with me and walking through my journey. I know I talk about some stuff that's not easy for a lot of people, and there are some triggering events. I hope that I have made that well known before you have clicked the button to watch this. And if you are able to watch it, thank you for joining me. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for letting me be vulnerable. And thank you for letting me share. No matter what I've walked through, no matter how much life I've lived, no matter what you've walked through or what you have lived and experienced. No matter what's happened, I want you all to remember that freedom is the advantage that you already own and that you can walk into it, take a hold of it at any time. I'll see you guys next week.